Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. As I mentioned yesterday, we have in studio with us Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, also a man who served in the House of Representatives. He is now the CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis, an organization I think very highly of, one that I've contributed to. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later. But again, in his service in the Army for 22 years, served in various combat zones, Operation Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom. Also the author of the book of 200 pages, Guardian of the Republic, by Crown Forum, and he's been a regular guest, and we're going to try to encourage that even more now that you live in the Dallas area. So great to have you here again.
It's good to be here with you, Kerby, as always.
We have published, sometimes when you're not here, publish some of your commentaries, but today we've published a number of your commentaries, and we'll get into quite a few of those, but I guess I'll take the one that came out today, The Good Crisis That Cannot Be Wasted. And we might remember that the former Chief of Staff in the White House, current Mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, said, never let a good crisis go to waste. What's happened in South Carolina is a crisis, and we're hearing everything about Confederate flags. We're hearing about gun control, but we're not hearing about some of the issues you think need to be really discussed.
It's absolutely right. And when you look at how the congregation of Mother Emanuel and the people of Charleston, South Carolina have responded, that's the example that we should be taking. But when you look at the politically manipulated crisis where they say, okay, how can we take this and capitalize? So all of a sudden you hear about gun control. This is not about gun control. It's about one single individual who was a racist sociopath. Let's call it as it is.
Yes.
But now it has expanded to be, it's about a Confederate flag. And now you even hear people talking about, statues. I mean, now Robert E. Lee's statue, which is in the U.S. Capitol, people are debating whether or not it should be taken down. As a matter of fact, as I was driving over here, Senator Harry Reid is now complaining about the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, whose mascot is the Running Rebels. Well, maybe they should change that mascot. What in the Sam Hill does that have to do with this crazed individual? But that is how you capitalize politically on these things.
So again, we need to not be distracted. And I think, again, we had a discussion yesterday on some of those issues. We had Walter Williams here. He was a good warm-up act for you, I think.
No, you're going downhill.
No, I don't. Yeah. But we did talk a little bit about gun control, which, is a good point. I might just mention that one of his columns in that new book that's come out, and one that he's written before, reminds us that at the turn of the last century, you could open up a Sears catalog, and there were 37 pages of firearms that you could buy. Even if you're a young child, you could send off your money, and they would send you a firearm. He tells the stories, and we've had people call into this program that sometimes there were all sorts of NRA rifle clubs that were established, and we've had people call in talking about, oh yeah, I remember bringing my rifle to school. It was unloaded, of course. I put it in the back. When we were done with school, we went out and we shot, and nobody was getting killed back then. So it isn't the presence of guns. Guns were a lot more available and oftentimes very prevalent in schools and sometimes even in churches than they are today. But there is a change of behavior, and that's why I think we need to focus on something that I think is a lot more important. And you talk about that in your recent column.
Yeah, it's a change in the culture. And look, I grew up in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, but I remember getting, the Daisy BB gun and, going in the back and shooting cans and things of that nature. But think about how, even though I grew up in the inner city, we didn't have school resource officers. Yeah. We didn't have people that, were metal detectors and things of that nature. But something has changed in the culture. Something has changed in who we are and, our placating evil. And one of the things that I look at is the breakdown of the family. Especially all across the urban communities, the inner city. That's one of the real crises that we're not talking about. We're in the 50th anniversary year of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs.
Yeah.
And 50 years ago, the two-parent household in the black community was almost 77%. Today, it's 52%.
Yes.
Now, instead of the NAACP and all of these other organizations worrying about a flag and worrying about the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest where it is, the black family, which is a foundation part of the community, has been destroyed in the past 50 years. Why are people talking about that? Why is the president of the United States of America, the first black president, not talking about, better education opportunities in the inner city? And when you think about the fact that in April 2009, he canceled the D.C. school voucher program, yet his children go to the prestigious Sidwell Friends. That's another one of the huge crises that are going on in the community, because without good quality education, Kerby, your opportunities and the things that you can do to improve yourself and be a part of this productive society, they, exponentially decrease. But that's not something we're talking about.
Again, that's in the latest column, The Good Crisis That Can't Be Wasted. You're talking about we didn't have this, but you did have something. I've read your book. You did have a mother and a father, which were outstanding role models. You tell a lot of stories in here about your family, and that is missing, unfortunately, in a lot of the black families in America today.
When you think back that scene where the mother in Baltimore,
I was thinking, yes.
Yeah, came out.
And I could see your dad or your mom doing that.
But see, that's the thing.
Yeah,
where was the dad
that.
that should have been able to do that? And then the other sad story is that young man was one of her 6 children. And so you go back and you think about this policy that Johnson implemented, saying that if a woman has a child out of wedlock, as long as she does not have a man in the home and continues to have children out of wedlock, the government will provide her a check. So basically the government said, especially in the inner city, in the black community, that the most important responsibility for a man is to be a father of your children. You don't have that responsibility. The government has taken that responsibility. The government has kicked the man out of the home. And when you look at the, segregation, all the horrible things that the black family went through, it was able to sustain that because you had strong black men. Where are they today?
Yes. We were warned about that. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, didn't he warn us
the
that?
The Negro family, and again, it was in response to what Johnson was doing, and he was castigated as a what? A racist.
Yes. And then, of course, ended up being
a Democrat.
Yeah. A senior senator from New York eventually, but I could see the handwriting on the wall 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we decided to fight a war on poverty, and poverty won. And we also, in the process, fought a war against the families that are on welfare, and unfortunately welfare, and broken families won.
The families lost.
Yeah.
$20 trillion have been spent on this quote-unquote war on poverty.
That's just incredible. Now, in your commentary here, and we're going to certainly focus on some others, we certainly talk about the breakdown of the family, and you certainly talked about education. But you mentioned one that, again, I know a lot of people won't mention, and that is the number of abortions in the black family. Since Roe versus Wade, 13 to 16 million black babies have been aborted. Now, we're told that black lives matter. Well, do black babies matter? What about that?
Well, the thing is, the politically expedient black lives matter. The life of Trayvon Martin, the life of Eric Garner in New York, the life of Michael Brown, because we can leverage that for our own political agenda. But think about the hundreds of young black men who have been killed on black violence in Chicago or any of the other inner cities, or we saw in Baltimore. But again, 13 to 16 million black babies. And these are CDC numbers. This is not Alan West making something up in the middle of the night. But Kerby, compare this to the amount of blacks who were killed during slavery.
Yes.
Just 2 to 3 million. Now, tell me what is more important, a stupid flag or the fact that we have a genocide going on where we have generations that will never know of Dr. King's dream, generations that will never know of the American dream. Now, someone has to stand up and say, stop this hypocrisy, stop with this insidious, inane, pursuit of a political driven agenda of Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. But what about these almost 16 million lives?
Somebody has to stand up, and I think former Representative Alan West is doing so. We're going to take a break. We have a lot more to cover, and then we'll open up the phones for your comments. That coming up right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
With all that's happening in our world, it's easy to be discouraged. Warren Cole Smith and John Stonestreet write in their book, Restoring All Things, to encourage you and to show how God and his people are engaged in fulfilling his promise to restore all things. Restoring is just one of the RE words that John Stonestreet talks about. There are other words like redemption, reconciliation, and resurrection, along with renew, repent, and restore. When he was on my radio program, he talked about the feeling we may have that Christians are on the wrong side of history, especially when it comes to issues like homosexuality. He acknowledges that it is easy to confuse this cultural moment with what is the ultimate story of the world. God is still in control. The church and the gospel message have answers to social problems we face. In the areas of poverty, government has spent trillions of dollars, and 50 years later still has not won the war on poverty because it focused on the wrong problems. John Stonestreet in his National Review essay says it was like trying to win a football game by defending the other team's cheerleaders. On the issue of abortion, we should be encouraged and use the pro-life success as a model for addressing other social issues. Look at the success of the pregnancy care movement and the innovative programs like Save the Storks. He also talked about the power of cultural imagination. While more than 24 states were passing marriage amendments defining marriage, the #1 TV show was Will and Grace. It did more to change minds about homosexuality than many of the political successes. Politics is downstream from culture. America's prison system is also broken. The goal seems to merely get bad people off the streets. It doesn't seem dedicated to putting good people back into society. That is why he encouraged our listeners to learn more about restorative justice by visiting the websites of Prison Fellowship and Justice Fellowship. If you want to be encouraged, you need to read about how God is restoring all things. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Guest in studio today is Alan West, and if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. You know him as a former lieutenant colonel as well as a former member of Congress from Florida, but now he is the CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis. His column that came out today, The Good Crisis That Can't Be Wasted. A little bit later, we're going to talk about a delusional and dangerous national security strategy, because you can certainly address a lot more than just domestic policy. But give us a history lesson for just a minute. You grew up in Georgia, so you're thinking of Lester Maddox, and we can think of George Wallace. But let's go over to South Carolina for just a minute. The governor at that time was Hollings, later became senator. Isn't he the one that raised the Confederate flag?
Absolutely. And there were Democrats that when they were told to take it down, they refused to do it. And this comes back to, again, I bring out the fact the last people that should be lecturing anyone in America about racism is the Democrat Party. I don't know how many of your listeners remember the movie Lincoln. Daniel Day-Lewis won the Academy Award.
Sure.
And that was an incredible laydown of the seminal fight that we still have today, the 13th Amendment. And who are the people that were for the 13th Amendment, and who are the people that were against the 13th Amendment? The Democrat Party, their history, when you look at this relationship with the black community, it has been about slavery. It has been about secession. After the the Republicans lost control at the turn of the century of the House and the Senate, and of course the White House, then all of a sudden all of that legislation of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were reversed. It was Jim Crow. It was more segregation. It was lynchings. It was the poll test, the poll taxes, the literacy test. And, now today, instead of the physical slavery, you have an economic slavery. And we talked about the failure of the Great Society programs. And there is an incredible quote vote that no one wants to talk about. Lyndon Johnson on Air Force One with several other Southern governors who said, if we get these policies passed, we'll have those you-know-whats voting for us for the next 200 years. Well, 50 years have passed by, and it's exactly the case. They did not want the civil rights legislation to pass. You had Robert Byrd, the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. You had Al Gore Sr. It was Senator Everett Dirksen and the Senate Republicans that got the civil rights legislation passed. But all of that is lost in history. And so I think what you see is a Democrat Party that wants to erase all this because guess what? It's their history of hatred. It's their history of segregation that they're trying to, through revisionist policies, erase.
Well, and I think part of that educational part is what you want to do through the National Center for Policy Analysis and some of your columns, because I'll tell you, there are young people that can't even maybe tell you who some of the founding fathers are. So for them to know how the Voting Rights Act or the Civil Rights Act were passed, or who initiated the war on poverty and how it's worked, you really have a whole new generation that needs to be educated.
A complete new generation, and that is why you see this vehement attack against school choice, school vouchers, charter schools, and homeschooling, because that is how you educate and not indoctrinate. So we're sending kids in the public education system where, like I said, revisionist history, and also the history that's based upon the ideology of the teachers union or that particular teacher, is what is being indoctrinated, not educated.
Since you mentioned that, one of the things you do mention in this commentary is just about school choice. And the voucher program is something that I think Republicans sometimes have endorsed, almost to a person the Democrats don't, because of the power of the National Education Association. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. The American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association. As a matter of fact, when Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York wanted to cancel the charter schools, one of the highest performing schools in New York City is a charter school located in Harlem called Success Academy.
Yes.
And who was it that went and complained to keep that school open? Single black mothers complained to Governor Cuomo.
Yes. So again, I think that is just another one of those action items, kind of solutions. And again, we recognize that those problems can be solved in Congress, or they could be solved at our various legislatures. But we have to find the right people to understand how important encouraging the family is, encouraging education is, and to recognize that some of these policies that initially were there to help actually have done a great deal of harm.
It is the unintended consequences, the second and third order effects, or in some cases, it could be intended consequences. I'm not here to say that, people in Washington, D.C. set out to do harm to the American people. But what I do see is that no one sits back and thinks, what happens 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years from now? Right. Look at where we are 50 years after the Great Society programs. What seemed like a good idea to help ended up being the hammock and not the safety net.
Yeah. And it does seem to me that all Americans are willing to give a hand up to a person that is desperate, but not a hand out. And that's, I think, the big struggle that we've had. And the few times when you've had something that looked like welfare reform, let's give Newt Gingrich and even Bill Clinton some credit.
Absolutely.
That's all been reversed, has it not?
Yes, it has been by the current president, Barack Obama. And that's where people came together, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, and they did what was right for the American people. My mother raised me with a very simple maxim. She said self-esteem only comes from doing esteemable things. And if we had people in government that understood that, then you would have an opportunity society, but instead they'd rather have a dependency society.
Let's take some phone calls. We have much more to talk about, but I think we've already stimulated lots of phone calls, as we always do when Alan West is in studio with us. So we'll go to your home state first, Georgia, WLGP. Andrea, you have the floor.
Oh, okay. This is Morehead City, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Look, I just wanted to, this Confederate flag being raised, it seems to me like with single families that are breaking up, that's your point, the family is breaking up, and we're to support the family, and so white or black, this was a young white man that did this and had some attitudes that were not good, and it looks like we need to address the attitudes within the family, white or black. Single family, I mentor a girl, and her mother is white. Her daddy's in prison, and he is white. And so white or black, it just looks like, Kerby, that we're supposed to the Confederate flag, I just guess I want to say quickly, that looks reactionary to me, and that's what the panel member is suggesting. It's reactionary and it's silly. It's not silly, it's serious, given the climate of our nation. But don't we need to grow up? Don't we the churches need to get a grip, And anyway, I want to hear what you have to say about that. I think it's not a white-black issue. I think the sooner we zero in on the spiritual problem here, which is what the churches, they're saying, you know what? We are united. We are united in Christ. Anyway, I want to hear what you have to say about that. Thank you for hearing me.
Sure. Well, and we'll get into some of that in the second hour because we have Chad Williams.
Yeah.
It's funny, we start with the Army in the first hour and they've got a Navy SEAL in the second hour. So we'll talk about what the churches can do. But any comments that you have about the family and the breakdown of the family?
Well, sure. You saw what the churches can do in the response in Charleston, South Carolina.
What a positive
It was powerful. It was all about unity. And you listen to the family members of the victims and what they said. God have mercy on your soul and I forgive you. I mean, that shows the power of spirituality. That shows the power of Christ in your life, because man of himself could never be able to say those type of things. But then what do you see? You see man's reaction. You see this whole thing about a Confederate flag. You see the whole thing about gun control. You don't see anyone talking about, okay, let's look at the environment. Where are the, the parents of this sociopath? What was the relationship there? And that's the real thing that we have to get back towards is, what is happening in our households? What is happening in, the lady just talked about, white versus black. It doesn't matter. The single parent white female that is raising the child because the white dad is in prison. We've got to put those pieces back together. But instead, folks are out there looking at the means by which they can divide us. They're elevating, the issues that are not about unity. They're elevating the issues that are about divisiveness, because that's how they gain power.
We're going to take a break and continue our conversation with Alan West. We're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about his program with the National Center for Policy Analysis. So you might want to visit the website. As you click on his picture there, you will see that, first of all, we got information about his book. And if you haven't found it, I've got my copy here. I've got it both digitally and also in the studio here in a print form. But also we take you to alanbwest.com and also a link to the National Center for Policy Analysis, NCPA. So you can find all of those there. And as you go to the website, we're getting close to the end of our fiscal year. And I haven't said much about that, but we do encourage you between now and next Tuesday, which is the end of our fiscal year, June 30th, to consider what you might do to help us finish this fiscal year in a strong way. We are blessed by having some individuals that have actually put a match fund out there for $25,000. So that means your gift to us at the end of this fiscal year for $100 becomes $200, or $200 becomes $400. And if you appreciate the kind of interviews that we're doing here, the kind of news and information you get, we encourage you to also visit the website pointofview.net. You'll find my commentary there. You'll find our Take Action item and our video today on human trafficking. So all of it is available at the website, but also click that button that says donate, because we would certainly encourage you to do what you can to help us out financially. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will continue our conversation with Alan West. And if you'd like to join us in that regard, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
When you hear about a child forced into the sex trade, it should make your blood boil. Someone needs to do something. Noel Boucher became that someone, leading a ministry called Pure Hope, promoting sexual purity and fighting sex trafficking. And it all began as his parents listened to Point of View.
Even when I was a young child, and even when that content was almost in the background, definitely shaped how I thought about my faith and what the Lord expected of me and the community that He would provide around me.
Kerby has met numerous young people in recent days who are on the front lines of the faith because God uses Point of View. Your support today will raise up another generation to impact lives. Listen, right now, every dollar you give will be matched, doubled. Please give online at pointofview.net. pointofview.net, or mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I listened to Point of View when I was probably in the 3rd and 4th grade, and that's really where I started hearing how to begin to integrate what you believed with what was going on in the world today. Point of View certainly allowed me to see the world around me in a different way than I would have seen it otherwise. And so I was much more aware of the things that are going on, much more aware of the dangers that people of faith will face in the world around them, and the dangers that come with the loss of our religious liberty. And so it certainly made me think about, how do you defend your faith in public, and what's the best means of doing that? And for me, outworking of that was just to go right into law school and to be able to defend the faith and defend people of faith in their day-to-day lives. For Point of View to have influenced my life at an early stage of my life, to be able to begin helping me think through important issues of the day so that we would be able to apply what we believe to what we do, that is carried with me to this day.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Alan West. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. A former lieutenant colonel in the Army, but also an individual that is a former member of Congress, but now the CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis and author of the book Guardian of the Republic. I'd like to talk about the NCPA for just a minute, because one of the things you're doing is talking about 10,000 and the force of 10,000 to fight our way through hostile territory. Give us a little bit of military history, because I think it's fascinating to
Well,
learn that.
it was an incredible military endeavor and campaign. This was back the Greek mercenary army led by the Spartans. This was 401 BC, and they were enlisted to help Cyrus the Younger to wrestle the Empire of Persia away from his brother Artaxerxes. And, the Spartans being up for a good fight, they said, sure, we'll go and do it. So upon landing there, they fought the Battle of Canaxa, and they were, of course, victorious. Historical accounts say that they had one Greek that was wounded, but Cyrus lost his life. And so here they are, even though they had won the battle, they had no reason or cause to continue on. And so they were stranded there. And by treachery, the Spartan leadership was captured and beheaded. So Xenophon became one of the new leaders and had to march 10,000 Greeks through the hostile territory of what is today Iraq, through Kurdistan, and up through Turkey to the Black Sea. And when I think about where we are in America and a lot of the things that you deal with, it seems that we're marching through hostile territory, but we must, remain, focused, resilient, and resolute, holding on to our fundamental principles and values. And so we came up with a campaign to enlist in 10,000 individuals, new donors to us at, $25 to $50, because it's so important that these policy centers not just have the conversations between themselves or in the world of academia, but I like to call it the Waffle House crowd.
Yes.
You've got to be able to talk to the everyday Americans so that they can understand. So we would like to, get 10,000 folks that join us, and we can share our good policy work with you so that now we start to be able to go on this march, because this is such a critical and vital time for us in our constitutional republic.
I would encourage you to find out more about the National Center for Policy Analysis. Matter of fact, past guests on this program have been people like Dr. Merrill Matthews, Dr. John Goodman. I can go down a very long list of individuals that I've learned from, and you are in the position now of taking this to the next level. And so I just encourage people to find out a little bit more about NCPA, and we have information about that on the website.
And join the 10,000.
Join one of those 10,000. And again, I love your history, because also in one of your commentaries here, you talk about the Sun Tzu's Art of War, and there's a very key passage that if you know the enemy and know yourself, you will need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. But if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Okay. Right now, we can't even say the words radical Islam, so we probably don't know our enemy. And I'm beginning to think that America's going through a crisis where it doesn't know who we are. So where are we?
We are in that third phase, and that's why I think you see us losing respect and regard of our allies. I mean, the fact that now it just came out that we've been, eavesdropping on the French presidents. And so, I mean, that has really caused a schism. But our allies don't have the trust and confidence, and our enemies are emboldened. So you think about where we are with our military capability and capacity. You have an army that is at 1939 pre-World War II levels. You have a United States Marine Corps that is at World War I levels, a United States Navy that is at 1917 levels. And just to kind of put that in perspective, in the Reagan administration, 575 naval warships. Today, 283. The goal is to take it down to 230. Now, some people on the left may believe that the oceans are, rising, but they definitely aren't shrinking. And then you have an Air Force that is the smallest and the oldest fleet since we created the modern United States Air Force. So what do you see happening? You see Russia and Vladimir Putin. You see the Chinese building islands in the South China Sea and taking over more territory and putting, armaments and weapons on these islands, which are along a sea trade routes where about 35 to 40% of commerce transits through. You see Iran. Why are we sitting at a table with Iran when their behavior has not changed whatsoever? And furthermore, they're holding 4 hostages there, to include a Christian pastor, Saeed Abedini. And then, of course, you see, ISIS. And to this day, I still remember the president standing up in August and saying, well, let me make myself very clear. ISIS is not Islamic. Well, I'm trying to still figure out, are they Presbyterian? Are they Episcopalian? We know they're not Southern Baptists. I hadn't heard them say hallelujah recently. So, but this is the problem when you have, a commander in chief, because that's the most important title of the president, that believes that he was elected to end wars. Well, Plato said very succinctly, only the dead have seen the end of war. And that is a very emboldening statement. And when you are basing your national security strategy on campaign promises and rhetoric, that's delusional.
Yes. Well, again, that's another article that just came out recently, and I think you will find that helpful. And again, it will get your attention as well. So just lots of things that you can find that Alan West has written. We have a link to his website, also a link to the National Center for Policy Analysis. And let's go back to the phones. I have a lot more to ask you, but I think they have some too. So let's see. I think this one is in Georgia. Tracy, go ahead.
Hi.
Yes, what would you like to say?
I actually just caught your radio program traveling through, but Mr. West, you have a lot of the same ideas that I do as well. I don't think this is a black thing or a white thing. I think this is an American thing. I think the American unit has failed, and I think the American people are at a crisis. We used to be the strongest nation in this country, and now we're all struggling. And to me, it seems like that media and the government has a big part in this, because one, media drives between race and between religion and between status, and the government is fighting this side, that side. We're not a unit anymore, and I feel like that's a big downfall in this country. I feel like people need to come back together as a unit and band together and stand up for what we as a country should feel like is best for us. Not a black thing, not a white thing, not a Republican, not a Democrat. We need an American that sticks together.
No, I could not agree with you anymore. I believe that what you see happening right now in the United States of America is, kind of like the old Soviet-style Politburo. It was them and then everyone else, and the them lived pretty well. And, of course, they made rules and laws for everybody else, but didn't apply to them. And so in America, what you see forming is an elite group that is based upon the political elite, the entertainment elite, and the media elite. And then you got everybody else. And so much is based upon, the special interest and the self-interest and not the American interest like you talked about. And until we can get not politicians, because a politician is going to tell you what they think you want to hear in order to get your, political support, your vote. You got to have statesmen. You have to have leaders. You have to have people that will stand up and give the American people the hard truth, but it is a truth that will unite us. It will restore this constitutional republic. And that's very threatening to people inside the Beltway, especially, where business is very good. If you are recently flying into Washington, D.C., as I did last week, one of the things that you will notice, construction cranes. Business is very good inside the Beltway. Mm-hmm. And as well, business is very good outside the Beltway, because the most lucrative counties in the United States of America all surround Washington, D.C. So who do you think they're promoting? They're promoting the people that make sure that the business is good there. We have good economic growth here in the state of Texas, but that should be replicated all across the country, with those type of policies.
Well, again, my commentary that came out on just all the comparisons between Texas and California, in large part because you had the New York Times saying, these claims being made by Governor Rick Perry, well, it just has to do with the fact that you've got good weather. It's kind of hot right now. I don't know how good it is. And that you've got oil and gas. Well, yeah, that's about 13% of it. But, they're trying to find ways to explain it away. But I think there's other suggestion, low taxes, light regulatory touch.
Yes.
You have been a representative from Florida. A lot of that happens in that state, too.
Absolutely. A lot of the same things. As a matter of fact, in the redistricting, the state of Florida picked up 2 new congressional districts. And guess who lost 2 congressional districts? Yeah. New York lost 2.
But you also lost because of
redistricting me out. But it's very interesting because people are voting with their feet.
Yes,
they are going to the states where they can have economic opportunity. Now, this is what you have to be very concerned about. When you look at the economic recovery of the United States of America, a good percentage of that was because of Texas and the oil and natural gas, the energy success. Absolutely. Now, if you lose that, what's going to happen?
Well, so again, there are consequences to policy, and I don't need to explain that to a member of Congress. Well, actually, there are some members of Congress, not you, that I maybe do need to explain that to, but we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll take a couple more phone calls, and also maybe get your comments when we come back about not only just the inability to label something as radical Muslim, but the inability to even have absolutes. We have transgender, now we have transracial, and we've seemed
It's
to have
whatever
lost.
you feel like in the morning.
I have to get your comments on that for sure. So we will take that break, and when we come back, we'll take some more phone calls too. 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to know more about Alan West or the National Center for Policy Analysis, we have links there on our website, pointofview.net. And I would certainly commend to you if you would like to read a book that will encourage you about his life and some of his vision. That book, Guardian of the Republic, is still available, and we have information about that on our website as well. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Alan West in studio with us for just a few more minutes, and in the second hour, let me just mention, we'll have in studio Chad Williams, new book out, Seal of God, and we'll move from Army to Navy. It'll be kind of a lot of fun.
Well, I was just speaking to Chad out in the green room, and talking about cultural change.
Yes.
When I grew up, it was John Wayne,
the Green Berets. Everybody wants to be in the Army, right?
And now it's about being a Navy SEAL.
It's the SEALs.
Yeah,
they have the uniforms, right?
It's the uniform. They get the women with the uniforms. I mean, there's nothing sexy about our uniforms.
Well, we'll hear from him as well. But
great warriors.
We've got quite a number of phone calls. But just before that, what about this culture where we have transsexual, transgender, transracial?
Yeah.
You can be anything you want to be, right?
Yeah, once upon a time, the Army's marketing term was be all you can be. Well, I think now it is be whatever you think you are going to want to be that day. So, the interesting thing about the Rachel Dolezal case, it was happening during the NBA Finals. So I once told some people that, I felt like Stephen Curry. and I wanted to start for the Golden State Warriors, and so I could get an NBA championship ring. I mean, this is insidious. I mean, we're trying to break down, roles between men and women. We are trying to break down, who we are. I'm very proud of the history of my family in this country. But when we start to excuse, these things away and just basically say, you can go out and be anything that you say or think you can be. And then, of course, we don't look at it as fraud, which is really the essence of what Rachel Dolezal was doing.
Yes.
We're accepting bad behavior.
Let's take some more phone calls. We'll head out to North Carolina this time. Stephen, you're on with Alan West.
How you doing, Mr. West?
Stephen, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Well, doing good. I just want to say I'm a retired from the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen.
United States Marines, I know. I know. These guys, talk about marketing.
Yes.
They got it.
They got it. Well, it's a military program, and as we say before, we can never thank those of you that served our country enough. So we thank you.
Thank you.
Simplify.
Yeah, amen. My question is this. When are you going to run for president?
Yes, there we go.
Shoot, man.
You're the only guy not running for president, right?
Yeah, I know. We just had Bobby Jindal today, so he's lucky number 13, and still got 3 or 4
Christie
more.
next week.
Look, the thing is this, and I always tell folks who bring that up, I will serve my country in whatever capacity God needs me to serve. And I think about Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6, trust in the Lord with all thy heart, lean not upon your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. I never thought that I'd be sitting here with Kerby at this point in time in my life, but God put me in this position, and I just seek to be obedient and to be used by him. And that's the most important thing. So what I will tell you, Stephen, is that you pray that when that still, quiet voice comes, whatever he needs me to be, that I will be obedient to it. And I'll also tell you this. I spent 3 years on an exchange assignment down at Camp Lejeune. I know how to say it properly because the Marines needed an Army guy to come down and teach them math.
You're so cute.
Take care, my friend. Semper Fi, hoorah.
Yeah, but there are some issues that people wonder if you can perhaps serve more outside of government than inside. I look at Jim DeMint, who is a senator from South Carolina, and I think he is doing more work now and having a greater impact as the head of the Heritage Foundation.
Sure.
You have served in Congress as a representative, but look at the incredible impact that you're having right now through the NCPA.
Well, that's why I say you let God make that decision. Last September I came out here and spoke in one of their lecture series, and then in October they gave me a phone call. I did not know that they were looking for someone to be a new president and CEO. So that's how that still, quiet voice can say, this is where I need you to be, and that's the most important thing.
Let's take a few more phone calls real quickly. We'll go out to California, KLMB. Kathy, thank you for calling today.
Yeah, they have been talking about taking down also Jefferson's memorial and that. And the thing is, though, is in the beginning of Obama's presidency, he was talking about how Jefferson had taken his oath on the Quran, but he had actually had the Quran to understand the Muslim religion because
the day of Algiers.
Yeah, and that at the time they were Somali pirates who were pirating our ships back.
Barbary pirates. Barbary pirates.
Barbary pirates taking our people. And I see this as an attack. I'm not saying that what happened in the South didn't happen, because it did, and we should never forget it, and we should be teaching it, because through history, you understand where our country was and now where it is. And so to hide it is wrong, but it also is being hijacked so that others can change the Constitution for what they want to see the history of our country to be.
Yes.
No, you're absolutely right, Kathy. That's called revisionist history. And I think it was George Santayana who in the mid to late 20s said those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And that's where we are. If you look at where America is in a global security situation. I mean, we're living in the days of Neville Chamberlain. We need a Churchill. But if you erase the history of this country to fulfill some type of politicized agenda, then what are we going to be teaching our kids? It's important that we teach our kids about the Civil War. It's important that we teach our kids about the issue that divided and separated this country. But then also we teach them about how we corrected ourselves. We teach them about Abraham Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address. We teach them about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, instead of us all of a sudden having us to believe that the 14th Amendment exists to redefine what marriage is, which is really what the Supreme Court is looking to decide. So, I am very concerned. As I said, this is not about education. It's about indoctrination, and it's about rewriting the history of America. And that's so dangerous.
And you did mention that. One of the things we've done is our Pray for America campaign, because we know we have some very important Supreme Court cases coming down on the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, and on the definition of marriage. And so we certainly encourage people to pray for America. And we also encourage them to be educated. And we certainly try to do this at Point of View. But one last time, let's mention again that people can go to ncpa.org, which is the National Center for Policy Analysis. Quite frankly, that's where I get some of my information for some of the columns I do every day. And I've really just have been so thrilled when I found out that you became the new president. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and tell people what they can find when they land on that website, because there are speakers, there are videos, there are all sorts of great resources.
The main focus is CPA, tax, pension, entitlement policy, also education, energy, healthcare, national security. Those are the preeminent, we think, federal government, responsibilities. But also we bring a lot of fantastic speakers here. As a matter of fact, local hometown guy, Glenn Beck now, he'll be speaking for us in October. Another local gentleman, Lieutenant General Ricky Lynch, who is the on-the-ground commander doing the surge in Iraq, is going to speak for us in November. And then we're going to have a panel with 3 very successful female mayors that are here in the state of Texas about how do you govern, large cities. The mayor of Irving, the mayor of Fort Worth, and then also the new mayor of San Antonio. So we want to be able to bring these programs and bring this policy work to you so that you can be better informed and truly be a citizen and not a subject.
Well, thank you for being here. We are thrilled that you're in the Dallas area. Let's do it again sometime.
Anytime. Call on me.
Alan West with us, and again, the CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis. And if you appreciated this interview that we did with him today, or if you maybe enjoyed some of the interview we did yesterday with people like Walter Williams or so many other individuals, certainly we encourage you to do what you can to support this ministry. And as I mentioned, we're coming to the end of our fiscal year. That ends June 30th. And if we can encourage you to do something to help us out financially, another great stimulus is the fact that we've had a couple of people that have set forth matching fund up to $25,000. So that means that your gift of $100 becomes $200. Your gift of $1,000 becomes $2,000. So we would certainly encourage you to consider what you might want to do between now and the end of our fiscal year, which is less than a week away. You can go to our website that says donate there. We are actually talking about Transform Lives. Today we're talking about Noel Boucher. And last couple of days, we talked about Jeremy Dies. So again, we believe that you can support this ministry. We would ask you to do so. And let's take a break. We'll talk with Chad Williams right after this.
Noel Boucher rescues people. The ministry he leads, Pure Hope, reaches those trapped in sex trafficking and helps set them free. Noel has listened to Point of View since he was a child, and that enables him to cut through the competing stories that try to give meaning to our times and to see God's story for his own life.
We have to understand God's narrative and our role in that. And of course, Christian radio, and specifically Point of View, is touching thousands and millions of lives across the world in equipping people to walk in that worldview.
Your gift to Point of View can make an impact for generations. And hear this, we all want to give generously. And right now, at the end of our fiscal year, no matter what your gift, $25 or $5,000, it will be doubled by a generous matching gift from ministry friends. So give now, online at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30. Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Many times, people who are older than me say they have given up hope on America. They don't believe that we can come back from the changes and challenges. The widespread promotion of anti-Christian beliefs is sweeping into courtrooms, schools, newsrooms, and homes. They are pushing to be mainstream and claiming the Bible and Christian beliefs are a thing of the past, or worse, bigoted. It is easy for the older generation to give up when America is so different now from the one they grew up with. But if you give up, where does that leave my generation and the ones behind me? I believe that we should stand and pray. The only one who can fix us and make America a shining light again is God. He promised his plans are to prosper his people and give us a hope and a future. Prayer is the best way we can act on the hope for a future. James wrote, "The fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much." I still believe that. If you believe God will shape the future by the prayers of his people, you can sign up to be a part of the Pray for America campaign at pointofview.net/pray.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me, and we're going to spend some time today talking about Navy SEALs and a testimony, as well as ministry. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. There's a new book out. It's published by Tyndale called Seal of God. The path is narrow, but the reward is great, and it is written by a Navy SEAL who's in studio with us today, Chad Williams. He actually has served his country proudly from 2004 to 2010. Also engaged in full-time ministry now. He and his wife Aubrey live in Huntington Beach, California. And Chad, what a story in this book. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Let me just mention that if people are thinking, okay, this is going to be a story about somebody who, since he was a kid, has wanted to be a Navy SEAL and was an individual that obeyed his parents and never gave anybody any difficulty, and then reached the culmination of that when he was a Navy SEAL, you're in for a real surprise, because you had an interesting and troubled life, but it makes for a great read and a great testimony. So let's go back to maybe the skateboarder part of it, because I think it's kind of interesting to see how you ended up being a Navy SEAL. So share that story if you might.
Sure. You know, I grew up in Southern California, kind of a typical beach kid, you know, skateboarding and surfing. And skateboarding was really the thing that I picked up very well. I ended up getting sponsored by a popular shoe company called Van Shoes. And so I was doing a lot of competing, tasted a lot of success, and then some popularity that came along with that. But by the time I was getting out of high school and just starting junior college at the local community college, they got a saying that if you aim at nothing, you'll certainly hit it. And I was hitting it dead on, because I'm failing all my classes. I wasn't attending. I'm not doing the skateboarding anymore. I am kind of partying and surfing and just hanging out with friends. The next thing I know, I'm failing all of my classes all the way across the board. And I'm pulling into the parking lot one day and just begin to realize, wow, here I am about to take finals that I haven't studied for. I'm going to fail that. I'm failing all my classes. I'm turning out to be one pathetic loser. I mean, the kind of guy that no young man wants to be. When you're young, you've got goals, you got plans, you have potential. You say, oh, I could be a pro ball player, I could be a pro skateboarder. But I was beginning to realize that it's time to fish or cut bait, that if I don't do something now, I'll forever be stuck in this mode. And so as I'm sitting there in my truck about to go into class, I start kind of daydreaming. Well, what does that look like? What could I do with my life? I want to go for something big. I want to go for something great, something that no matter what happens in my life from that point forward, I could always look back and say, hey, at least I did that thing. And so this idea pops into my head. I go, I know what that is. I'll go become an Alaskan crab fisherman. Yeah. Deadliest catch. By far one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. I thought there's some bragging rights in that job. And so I almost settled on that when this other idea popped in my head. I go, wait a minute, why can't I go join the military? Be a part of the most elite. Go through the most difficult, grueling military training there is in the world. I know what I want to be. I want to be a U.S. Navy SEAL. And so right there, school parking lot, as I'm about to take finals, I decide that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a SEAL. And so my first order of business is this. I don't got to go to class anymore because I'm going to be a SEAL. So I started my truck up and I took off. And to be honest, I haven't been back to school ever since.
Well, and in the book here, you talk about telling your dad, and he wasn't exactly saying, oh, boy, that's exactly what you need to do. And, boy, you certainly have wanted to do this all your life. He gives you this kind of litany of all the things that you've failed at already. We kind of have a little bit of a feel for it, but talk about that conversation.
Sure. I mean, I got to let him know the bad news and the good news, as I put it. You know, so I let him know the bad news. I'm failing all my classes. He's looking at me like, what's the good news, Chad? And I let him know, well, you're looking at somebody that's going to be a Navy SEAL. And my dad, I mean, you got to kind of give him credit. He's the voice of reason here. Yeah. He's watched this pattern in my life. So he's trying to let me know, Chad, joining the military is not like any of these other things you've ever done in the past, like playing ball or skateboarding or going to the local community college. And when you decide you're over it, you could just stop. He says, if you join the military and for some reason you don't make it, suppose you quit SEAL training, he goes, you can't just get out. He goes, you know what's going to happen to you? You're going to find yourself stuck in the military, chipping paint off some boat in Japan. Well, the conversation pretty much ended right about there, just in a fury. I go storming out of there. Meanwhile, that just reaffirmed in my mind that I'm going to show him I'm going to die before I quit.
Yes, well, and again, you have actually found a mentor, which I think is so key into your life. Scott Helvenston, do I have the name right? And I've been reading about that, and of course, he was the key to this. But before you met up with him, you were just working out, and I'm very impressed with the kind of the self-imposed workout that you gave yourself as well. Talk about that.
Well, I just kind of came to the realization that if I want to be a Navy SEAL, and this really is the most difficult, grueling military training there is in the world, I got to be willing to die before I quit. Yeah. I'd read a book when I was younger called Rogue Warrior by Richard Marcinko, who is really the founder of SEAL Team 6. And so I knew this is the best of the best, is the cream of the crop. So I got to give everything I've got. And so I would be doing hundreds and thousands of pull-ups and push-ups. I'd be running. I was convinced that if I want to be a Navy SEAL, I have to be able to jump off the Huntington Beach Pier, which is illegal to do, and I have to be able to evade the lifeguards when they try to catch me. And I probably did this like 50 times over the summer. I actually made the mistake one time of bringing a friend along with me, and I was telling him, look, man, whatever you do when we go jumping off this pier, don't go hanging on to the pylons because there's barnacles that are razor sharp, and they will cut you up. And what does he do? We're about halfway in. He goes grabbing onto the pier. And sure enough, he's bleeding all over the place. He's getting rescued by the lifeguards. And suddenly I realized that the lifeguards don't know that he jumped off the pier with me. And so they think they're just doing a typical rescue. And so I'm trying to tell him, hey, man, we need to get out of here. We need to go. They don't have us caught. And he was shivering cold. He goes, no, just go without me. And then by then, the people that were at the end of the pier, just kind of looking out into the ocean that saw us jump off the pier, they yell out, hey, those are the guys that jumped off the pier. And ended up getting a ticket there. And it's kind of funny if we have time to get back around to it. I ended up meeting that lifeguard again about 10 years later in a really funny way. It's not even in the book. But these are the things I was convinced that I needed to do, self-motivated. But my dad, he could tell I was pretty serious. And so he invited me up into his room one day and says, you really want to do this, huh, son? You want to be a SEAL? Yeah, Dad, I want to be a SEAL. He goes, great. I set up a workout for you with a Navy SEAL. His name's Scott Helvenston. Yeah. He goes, check out my computer screen. And I look over at the computer screen, and I'll never forget the funniest little one-liner that was there in this email. It says, can Chad come out and play tomorrow? And I'm looking at this, scratching my head saying, play? I'm like, Dad, are you sure this guy's even really a Navy SEAL? He goes, yeah, he's a SEAL. And I'm like, and you met him on the internet. I'm thinking anyone can claim anything on the internet. He's a SEAL. I'm like, fine, I'll go meet up with this Navy SEAL. Well, little did I know there was more of a conversation my dad had with this Navy SEAL that I didn't know about at the time, but I would later on find out about it. I could just kind of give your listeners the little bit of a backstory. My dad got on the phone with Scott previous to this email, and he says, hey, look, my son wants to be a SEAL. He's making the greatest mistake of his life. He has no idea what he's getting himself into. So if I pay you some money, would you be willing to meet up with my son? And I want you to bury him, just crush him, beat this desire of becoming a SEAL out of him. And so Scott, after thinking about it for a while, he shoots off that email. Can Chad come out and play tomorrow? So when I went off to Oceanside, California to go and meet up with this Navy SEAL, Scott Helvenston, I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself in for.
No, and the flutter kicks and everything else you had to do that you hadn't trained for. So anyway, we'll get back to that in just a minute. But we need to take a break, and we're talking about this new book, which I think anybody that would love to hear a wonderful testimony, this is reason enough. But again, this book would also be something to hand to people that that are perhaps in the military that would really have a great deal of respect for SEALs. Because not only do you learn the story of him becoming a SEAL, but also the story of him coming to know Jesus Christ. And all of that is tied into Greg Laurie, who's been in that very chair with us. And there's an upcoming crusade that we're going to talk about. So we're going to tie all this together, but we need to take one of those mandatory breaks. So we'll continue our conversation with Chad Williams and his book, Seal of God. The path is narrow, but the reward is great. We'll be back with him right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
With all that's happening in our world, it's easy to be discouraged. Warren Cole Smith and John Stonestreet write in their book, Restoring All Things, to encourage you and to show how God and his people are engaged in fulfilling his promise to restore all things. Restoring is just one of the RE words that John Stonestreet talks about. There are other words like redemption, reconciliation, and resurrection, along with renew, repent, and restore. When he was on my radio program, he talked about the feeling we may have that Christians are on the wrong side of history, especially when it comes to issues like homosexuality. He acknowledges that it is easy to confuse this cultural moment with what is the ultimate story of the world. God is still in control. The church and the gospel message have answers to social problems we face. In the areas of poverty, government has spent trillions of dollars, and 50 years later still has not won the war on poverty because it focused on the wrong problems. John Stonestreet in his National Review essay says it was like trying to win a football game by defending the other team's cheerleaders. On the issue of abortion, we should be encouraged and use the pro-life success as a model for addressing other social issues. Look at the success of the pregnancy care movement and the innovative programs like Save the Storks. He also talked about the power of cultural imagination. While more than 24 states were passing marriage amendments defining marriage, the #1 TV show was Will and Grace. It did more to change minds about homosexuality than many of the political successes. Politics is downstream from culture. America's prison system is also broken. The goal seems to merely get bad people off the streets. It doesn't seem dedicated to putting good people back into society. That is why he encouraged our listeners to learn more about restorative justice by visiting the websites of Prison Fellowship and Justice Fellowship. If you want to be encouraged, you need to read about how God is restoring all things. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Pleased to have in studio with us today Chad Williams. He is the author of the book Seal of God. The path is narrow, but the reward is great. Forward by Greg Laurie. We're going to talk about some of that connection in just a minute. You mentioned that lifeguard, and I thought it might be good to finish the rest of that story. It's not in the book, but it is a great story because it was an open door for you that you did not have up until that point. And so even in your misbehavior, God used that in a very effective way, didn't he?
That's right. So recorded in the book, I'm jumping off the pier. I get ticketed by this lifeguard that, in my mind, he didn't have me caught. Really, I turned myself in. It was my buddy that got caught. But I had a real bad attitude with this guy. Yeah. I'm telling him, you're just a lifeguard. You're pathetic. You shouldn't be giving me a ticket. You didn't really catch me. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL one day. He goes, oh, great. Well, I know the XO over at SEAL Team 1. Do you want me to let him know you're coming? And I'm like, oh, right. Forget it. I'm sorry. Well, fast forward about 10 years later, I'm down in Huntington Beach again, but now I'm a Christian, and I'm down there evangelizing with a mentor of mine by the name of Ray Comfort.
Who's been on the program with us. Yeah, we know Ray Comfort.
And this lifeguard that's in a truck, he signals me over. He says, hey, he's hollering at me and waving me over. And I'm looking over at him, and I'm thinking, this lifeguard's trying to shut us down and stop us from preaching the gospel. Mm-hmm. I'm not coming to you. You come to me. And he keeps waving me over. Hey. And so I walk over there, and he remembers my name. He goes, hey, Chad. You remember me? And I'm looking at this lifeguard, and no. He goes, I gave you a ticket for jumping off the pier. And this is like a flashback to like 10 years back almost now. And I'm like, oh, no, I remembered how I was with him. I was such a jerk. Yeah. And so immediately I'm trying to let him know, hey, man, I'm different now. I've become a Christian. He goes, I could tell. And one of the things that I was doing over at Harvest, I was running the high school ministry at the time, and they wanted me to start getting into the public schools. Sure. And so I said, great, I'd love to do that. How do I do it? And they go, you're a Navy SEAL, figure it out. And I'm like, oh, all right, So I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to use my Navy SEAL card. I'll be calling up the front offices, say, hey, I'm a former Navy SEAL. I'd like to talk to the kids, and they'll let me in. Well, I was just getting stonewalled. I couldn't get into any schools, and I'm exhausting every avenue I know. I can't do it, and I begin to realize I'm failing because I'm trying to do this in my own power and my own might. I'm not doing this in the right order. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. So I really just began to make that my prayer. Lord, would you open up a door? Well, here's this lifeguard. Hey, Chad, you remember me? And we go through that, and he goes, I don't know if you'd be interested or not, but I can get you into all the public schools in the area here. And I just immediately I realized this is the open door.
That's the open door.
And no doubt about it, he ended up getting me into 28 public high schools that I got to go on campus and share the gospel with these kids.
Well, again, I might just mention the book's 280 pages, but that's not in the book. So that's another reason to listen to the interview, because you finish the rest of the story. Okay, your dad sets up Scott to give you the worst, if you will, beating in your life, if you really want to get down to it, and all the kinds of requirement. But in the process, you began to look at him and said, I think I can be a SEAL. I mean, I can probably do what he's doing. And he's really buff, and maybe I can get that way. And so really he becomes your mentor, doesn't he?
That's right. The worst impact that I guess you could say I ran into really with Scott was we're running down this trail. And here I'm being set up to be like taken out by this guy. I didn't know it at the time. Yeah. And I'm running ahead of him. And then I'm looking back, and he looks almost like this T-1000 from Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie, Terminator 2, the machine just coming my way. Passes me on this trail. We're running full speed. Then he comes to a dead stop, and I don't even have time to process why would he stop like that when I'm greeted by his fist. I never saw it coming, just impaling my stomach. I mean, this guy physically assaults me, right? I'm going for a ride, feet off the ground. I've been clotheslined, wind knocked out of me before my back even hit the ground. Poof of dirt goes up all around me, and I remember thinking in my mind, some guy my dad met off the internet's got me in the middle of the wetlands now. I'm thinking child predator. He's got me. He jumps on top of me, and he just starts ragdolling me in the ground. You hear the threads of my shirt ripping, spit flying out of his mouth. But then he says these words, you want to be a Navy SEAL, you better stay 3 paces behind me. And it hits me. This is it. This is for real. If I quit right now, I'll forever be a quitter. I knew the way I respond now is going to affect the trajectory of the rest of my life. And so I just reaffirmed in my mind, I'm going to die before I quit. And I get up, I start going after him. 3 paces. This goes on for a few miles. I hang in there with him. And finally, he's pacing back and forth, and he's looking at me almost like one of these UFC, MMA cage fighters, piercing eyes, just ready to get it on, waiting for the referee to say, let's do this. And at the time, just remember, I'm this sort of like 19-year-old skater punk kid, so I'm going to project to this Navy SEAL that I'm willing to fight him at all. So I'm thinking, okay, no direct eye contact, just use your peripherals. Don't set this guy off. When next thing I know, he breaks this awkward tension by saying, hey, if we would have gone another mile or two, would you have stayed with me? And that's when I told him, Scott, I'll die before I quit. He goes, great. You want to meet up again for another workout tomorrow? And I'm kind of thinking, are we going to talk about this flashback he had back there on the trail, man, or what? And I say, yes, okay. I'll meet up again for another workout. He goes, great. And so now I'm going back home, and I'm feeling a little humiliated. I just got beat up by this Navy SEAL, but what am I going to do? He's a SEAL. I'm kind of dragging my feet. But then I begin to realize, hey, I made it through a SEAL workout. I could do this again tomorrow. I could do it again the next day. So I go from dragging my feet to I'm practically clicking my heels. My dad can't wait to find out how it went. So as I'm reaching for the door, he's already pulling it open. He says, how did it go, son? And that's when I tell him, Dad, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. He's like, what? He gets on the phone with Scott. We all had lunch one day, and they filled me in on this whole backstory. It's how I know now. He goes, what is going on? I paid you to crush him, to beat the desire of becoming a SEAL out of him. He comes home now, and he wants to be a SEAL more now than ever. And Scott's telling him, look, I know what you wanted me to do. I tried, but I think he actually might have what it takes to make it. And so from that day forward, I met up with Scott virtually every single day.
Yes.
And initially when we're working out, he called me Bubba. All right, Bubba, come on over here, do some push-ups. Come on, Bubba, let's do some pull-ups. Eventually, though, I became
Junior. Yeah.
Junior.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was like a son. Yeah.
He became like a second father to me. My mentor. I idolized him. He's everything I want to be. And some. He's no ordinary Navy SEAL, if there ever were such a thing. He holds all kinds of records. He's the youngest man to have ever made it through SEAL training. He grew up in over 27 different foster homes. So the military took him at a very early age, 15 years old. He completed SEAL training by the time he was 17. Navy SEAL at 17 years old. World champion pentathlete. He's the fastest Navy SEAL in the SEAL training obstacle course. And one other one's kind of funny. He was on a TV program called Man vs. Beast. On this program, the beast always wins the human being in this competition or strength or speed. So they get Scott on this program to go up against a beast through an obstacle course. You know what they chose? A chimpanzee to go against him. And so he's like, yeah, I'll race the monkey. He's not the kind of guy to back down. So he shows up. The irony of it all is that they're getting through all these obstacles. By the time they get to the monkey bars, Scott's so far ahead of this monkey, it's obvious he beats the beast. He's the only man to beat this beast on his TV program, Man vs. Beast. And I get to spend almost every day with them.
Yeah.
But our time's coming to a close. You know, I've got a date and it's set to go join the military.
That's right.
So one of the ways Scott and I'd wrap up a workout together was we'd go down to his local community pool. We'd kind of talk about what we got going on in life. And he brought up an opportunity, as he put it, to go overseas again.
Yes.
He says, who knows, Junior, perhaps I could make a difference. He's very patriotic. Cared not only about freedom as we know it here, but he honestly was very concerned about even the children caught in the midst of it all in the Middle East. And so he decides to do it. And I'm getting a phone call from him as he's on his way out saying, all right, Junior, I'm about to go do this thing, referring to Iraq. He says, I just want you to know something I've never told anybody I've ever trained before. He says, I know you're going to make it through SEAL training. And to hear those words from Scott, that was it. That meant the world to me. So he's just reminding me, all right, by the time I get done over here, you'll be done with boot camp. You'll start SEAL training, and I'll be right there. We're going to see you make it through. And so we say our goodbyes. And I can't wait to see you when you get back, Scott. And I figure if I can't work out with my mentor in person, you know, here I am, I'm about to go. Next best thing is to work out them on video. He's got some recorded video workouts. And this isn't Zumba or Pilates. I mean, these are some Navy SEAL workouts, right? And so I'm turning on the television one day, and I'm putting the workout into the player. Scott's face is there on the screen. It's a picture of him smiling, typical profile shot of him. And then I realized that this thing is not loaded in all the way yet. And so what is Scott doing on TV?
Yes.
And I'm just trying to figure it out. Is he on another show? He didn't let me know. And as I look at the screen, I see at the lower third Scott's birth date followed by a dash, and it says March 31st, 2004.
Yes. Yes.
And before I could even really just comprehend what that meant, this still image of Scott, a picture of him smiling changes, and I'm no longer looking at him smiling. I'm looking at video footage of him thousands of miles away, just laying in the street of Fallujah, Iraq. I'm identifying him. I mean, he's got arms that I've memorized with mental pictures in my mind because I idolize him, and I'm looking at those arms. They're lifeless. He's got this Iraqi mob. They surrounded his body. There's this video footage that they captured in a premeditated attack, a premeditated ambush, as they're beating and wailing away on him with sticks and rods and chanting in Arabic, Fallujah's the graveyard of Americans. And they sent this footage back to the States, very much like what ISIS is doing today, taking this footage of like the burning of the Jordanian pilot or videotaping all these beheadings and sending it back to the States to try and scare us as the media plays it. But I'm watching, and this is hitting on such a personal level because this guy is like a second father to me. And they hang him upside down from the Euphrates River Bridge after dragging him through the streets of Fallujah. And they set his body on fire. And I just watched through a screen as they chanted in Arabic, Fallujah's the graveyard of Americans.
We've got to take a break, but an incredibly powerful part of the book. And, of course, you then go through SEAL training. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, going to a harvest crusade and giving your life to the Lord, and just some incredible things that are part of this book. Already you get a pretty good sense of how well written it is and how well told the story is. It's again entitled Seal of God. The path is narrow, but the reward is great. Chad Williams is the author, forward by Greg Laurie. And when we come back, we'll continue that story. And then we'll take some phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. You can find out more about Chad Williams and the book at our website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
When you hear about a child forced into the sex trade, it should make your blood boil. Someone needs to do something. Noel Boucher became that someone, leading a ministry called Pure Hope, promoting sexual purity and fighting sex trafficking. And it all began as his parents listened to Point of View.
Even when I was a young child, and even when that content was almost in the background, definitely shaped how I thought about my faith and what the Lord expected of me and the community that He would provide around me.
Kerby has met numerous young people in recent days who are on the front lines of the faith because God uses Point of View. Your support today will raise up another generation to impact lives. Listen, right now, every dollar you give will be matched, doubled. Please give online at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
In my childhood, pre-internet, the radio played a fairly large role. I remember hearing Point of View come on the radio and Marlon Maddox and the introduction to global perspectives on what God and his people are doing throughout the earth. Even when I was a young child, and even when that content was almost in the background of family life or of commuting or being dropped off at sporting activities, there was a sense, and it created a sense within me, that there were people in the world who were leading well, following Jesus, communicating the gospel, and applying that to our lives and our cultural experiences. And I think that impact definitely shaped how I thought about my faith, even as a child, and what the Lord expected of me and the community that He would provide around me to fulfill the purposes for my life. All of us need understanding. Scripture says, seek, gain, look for, apply understanding in our lives. And really, understanding is about understanding a narrative, a story, especially in the 21st century where we have so many stories, so much information, so many competing narratives coming against us. We have to understand God's narrative and our role in that. And of course, Christian radio, and specifically Point of View, is touching thousands and millions of lives across the world and equipping people to walk in that worldview.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Chad Williams with us today, and I might just mention we have a link to his website, NavySealChadWilliams.com, or some of the other websites. And of course, we're also going to be talking about Harvest America, because one of the reasons you're in town is because we are giving a lot more publicity to this Harvest America Crusade, March 6th of next year. Greg Glory's been with us in the past, and we're talking about this opportunity to not only have people in the Dallas area come to AT&T Stadium, that's 100,000, so 100,000 people there, but anywhere in the country, anyone that's listening right now, you can actually have a live cast in your own church. And there are thousands of venues where that has taken place, either in the church or even in homes. And so, Chad, I know that you've worked with Greg Glory, but this is just another opportunity for people to get the gospel out to people that maybe never would come to a church but might come to a venue and hear the gospel and become a Christian.
Exactly, and there's a lot of situations like that where people just don't want to darken the door of a church, but you get them to go to some outside venue. You know, maybe your church partners with another church, and you say, hey, let's go over to, for instance, in Arizona, they went to the Tim Toyota Center and got a bunch of folks to come out over there.
Yeah.
And it's all about advancing the kingdom. You know, it's all about the fight for freedom, very much like Navy SEALs who've been given a duty and a task to really take it to the enemy to go after terrorists. Well, you know, we're called soldiers of Christ, you know, in 2 Timothy. And what we're supposed to be doing is really taking it to the ultimate terrorist, which is the enemy of our soul, going to and fro like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. So the greatest weapon that we have to charge the kingdom of darkness with is the gospel, and that's what Harvest America is all about. That March 6th, it's going to be really, it's one church all the way across the nation.
Yes.
One day and one gospel message.
And again, we've talked with Greg about what he did in the past with the American Airlines Center, and that was an opportunity to just reach so many people, but this is kind of on steroids. I mean, it's like a tenfold increase, and so we really want to continue to talk about that, and we'll do that. And let's, if we can, tell the rest of your story and then get into some of the aspects there. But last we left you, you were going to be a Navy SEAL. You have to go through Hell Week. This is amazing. Those chapters in there, I just go, I mean, I could feel my heart race, and I wasn't even in the boat. I wasn't even in the cold water with you, but it just gives you a sense of what it's like to go through that. Can you give us a kind of a short summary of what it's like to go through that first week?
Sure. In a thumbnail sketch, you know, Hell Week, it's 5.5 days long. You get 4 hours of sleep. That's not 4 hours of sleep per night. That's a grand total of 4 hours of sleep for the next 5.5 days.
Yes.
From the very moment Hell Week begins, these instructors are waking you up, shooting machine guns, hot brass pouring out of your neck. I still have a scar on my neck to this day from the hot brass sticking into my neck. And they've got you doing pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups into the thousands as they have a fire hose and they're blasting you. And the air's so cold that it bites. I went through in February when the water temperature is so cold, you go jumping in and it takes your breath away. Mm-hmm. And you don't get to wear a wetsuit. And you perform what's called surf torture. And surf torture is where you link arms with your buddies, go walking out into the ocean 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, lay down in the surf zone so you can't see the waves that are coming in, pounding you in the face. You only get to breathe when the ocean decides that it's going to let up on you and let you breathe, and you begin to shiver. And the shivering turns to jackhammering because you look like you're hanging onto a jackhammer. And these instructors will say, we're not letting any of you guys out of the water till 3 of you give up and quit. And they have a brass bell there for anyone that wants to quit. They ring that bell 3 times. But this is everything to everybody there. Everyone has vowed, we're going to die before we quit. But they've got 5.5 days to play these sadistic games. They're going to get their quitters. And so it is a battle of the wills with some very tough guys that you're going up against, your classmates. And if you're not in the water performing surf torture, you cover over 200 miles during these 5.5 days on your feet. And that's with the weight of a boat on top of your head that rubs through the hair, through the skin in the top of your head. The pressure's so great. In the class before us, the guy broke his neck under the boat, just to kind of give folks an idea. Because there's water that gets inside of the boat, you know, and sand, and you have the paddles. And then, you know, just imagine what 5.5 days of salt water does to your skin, not having a dry moment. I mean, people have been in a hot tub before, and they're like, time to get out. My hands are getting a little wrinkly. 5.5 days of salt water and beach sand, rubbing, grinding in all the unfriendly places, every square inch of your body, just rubbed raw, nerves exposed. And then on top of all this, you've got this sleep deprivation, this physical exertion, and then you really go into hallucination.
Yeah, you talk about seeing, what is it, Ninja Turtles in the water?
That's right. Ninja Turtles were a very big deal to me when I was a little kid. And so I'm looking out in the water.
Ninja Turtles in the water because you're hallucinating, right?
Yeah, Raphael, you know, Michelangelo, and you know, I'm looking at the other guys like, guys, you see this? I'm you know, and they don't. They, you know, they're impressionable. They're like, they're not doubting me. They're saying, where? You know, they're just like, show me. And another guy's, he's got his own problems. He's jumping up on the front of the boat like he's George Washington, throwing a big hand salute and calling out the Statue of Liberty in Southern California. So, you know, looking back on it, it's hilarious. But man, when you're going through it, it is tough. This is just a 5.5 day sketch of about a 2-year long pipeline. Numbers speak for themselves. We could wrap it up on this point. toughness-wise. 173 guys started in my class, all vowed the same thing: we'll die before we quit. By graduation day, there's only 13 of that original class number still standing there.
13 out of that. Wow.
By far one of the happiest days of my life.
But again, this was supposed to be the culmination. And then you were supposed to feel really good about that. And this is the emptiness that comes, because then you tell stories. And again, I'll let people read about going out and drinking, blacking out, fighting, waking up and seeing blood on you and not even knowing whose blood it is, and all of that. And you just become sort of numb during all of that, apparently what you said. And of course, it takes almost a whole year for your body to recover from some of the things that you went through as a SEAL, right?
That's right. In fact, I had numbness in my feet for 2 months after Hell Week. There were parts of my toes that I couldn't even feel. There's just so much cellular damage that you do to yourself. But not only was it one of the happiest days, it was one of the lowest days of my life.
One of the lowest.
I wasn't ready for that. That didn't make any sense to me. But I would later hear these words spoken by Christian philosopher Ravi Zacharias, and I thought those words hit graduation day nail on the head. He says one of the loneliest moments a man will ever experience is when he's achieved that which he thought would deliver the ultimate. In the end, it lets him down. And what he's referring to there is really the human condition on steroids, that you always think the grass is greener on the other side, that I'll just be happy if I can get over there. And so you have a hunger, you have a drive, you get there, you eat it up, and you are satisfied when you get that goal. But what happens? The satisfaction doesn't last. You get hungry all over again. Well, there's always room to improve. You could always raise the bar a little bit more. So you reason within yourself, I just need to go for something big, something greater. And so you do. And the same thing happens. You get hungry, you get thirsty all over again. It's a vicious cycle. But the big question is this: what happens when you have gotten to the top?
Yes.
What happens when there is no next? You can't push the bar anymore. A billionaire was asked that question in Forbes. If you can go back in time and give yourself a word of advice, what would it be? And he said, well, I would go tell myself that when you get to the top of the mountain, there's nothing up there. And so for me, becoming a Navy SEAL, this was my top of the mountain experience. But really what I was experiencing was those words. One of the loneliest moments a man will ever experience is when he's achieved that which he thought would deliver the ultimate. In the end, lets him down.
Wow. You were numb, and then you decided, and again, we'll have to look back and figure out how that happened, to go to a Greg Laurie Harvest Crusade. And you had told your girlfriend, who now is your wife, there's a couple of things. First of all, they're going to have music, and then Greg Laurie's going to speak, and then they're going to ask you to raise your hand. Don't raise your hand, right?
That's right.
And then you go through it, and Greg Laurie is talking to everybody, but you felt like he was talking to you, and guess what? Chad raises his hand.
That's right. My plan was to get out of there as quick as possible because I had no sincere intention. I had a keg of beer that was literally hiding in a garage waiting for us. But next
Which
thing I know,
you found 2 years later.
That's right. But he's got me captured. He's talking about a soldier by the name of Naaman. Here I am. I'm an active duty Navy SEAL. He said, get to hear about this. And Naaman, we learn, he's a Syrian commander. He's had great success in battle. He's got an entourage of men that highly regard him, highly respect him. Even the king enjoys Naaman's company. He has got it going on. The Bible says he's a man of valor, but Naaman has leprosy. And leprosy during Naaman's time is a skin disease that was certain death. He's a dead man walking. And that's exactly how I felt. Like I got it going on the outside. All my friends, Chad, you got to be living on top of the world. You made it, bro. You were a SEAL. And I just put on this front. Yeah, man, living a dream. When in reality, underneath it all, I felt like a dead man walking. When we find out that, what Naaman has to do is he goes and sees the prophet over in Israel. He tells him to go dip himself 7 times. He doesn't want to do it. His pride's getting in the way. It seems foolish to him. And then finally, he does the most difficult thing. He strips away that pride. In an act of faith and trust, he makes his way out into that water. And the leprosy's gone. And this gets related to the gospel.
Yes.
That leprosy being a picture of sin, spotted and blotted and covered with it. And that's how we are. We're struck through with sin. But Jesus, he came into this world. He was holy, pure. And when he went to the cross, he traded skin with you and I, as it were. He took our leprosy, our sin upon himself so that we could be lavished with God's grace and his mercy. So he pays for our sin. And not only that, rises again from the dead, conquering sin, conquering death, declaring, because I live, you also shall live. And just as Naaman, he had a difficult thing to do. It started with going to his own funeral, as it were. He had to strip away his pride. Jesus says, if anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his own cross daily, follow after me. That March 14, 2007, when I was at this event where Greg Laurie was preaching, I realized this is exactly what my problem has always been and what I really need to do. All these other things left me hungry and thirsty for more because I was making God out of things that weren't God. Jesus says, you drink of my living water, you will never thirst again because the search is over, you are complete. That night, I repented and I put my faith and trust in Jesus. And it's just like the New Testament scriptures say, repent and be converted that your sins may be blotted out. So much like that leprosy, that times of refreshing may come.
Going to take a break, and we'll find out the rest of the story with Chad Williams. The book is entitled Seal of God, and we'll talk a little bit about this Harvest Crusade coming up. All that right after this.
Many times, people who are older than me say they have given up hope on America. They don't believe that we can come back from the changes and challenges. The widespread promotion of anti-Christian beliefs is sweeping into courtrooms, schools, newsrooms, and homes. They're pushing to be mainstream and claiming the Bible and Christian beliefs are a thing of the past, or worse, bigoted. It is easy for the older generation to give up when America is so different now from the one they grew up with. But if you give up, where does that leave my generation and the ones behind me? I believe that we should stand and pray. The only one who can fix us and make America a shining light again is God. He promised his plans are to prosper his people and give us a hope and a future. Prayer is the best way we can act on the hope for a future. James wrote, "The fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much." I still believe that. If you believe God will shape the future by the prayers of his people, you can sign up to be a part of the Pray for America campaign at pointofview.net/pray.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Chad Williams with us for just a few more minutes. His book is entitled Seal of God. It is published by Tyndale. Look for it in your local bookstore, but if not, we have a way for you to order it, and we, of course, have a link to his website. Forward by Greg Laurie, and I'm glad we finally got you saved here, so that's good. But talk about the rest of the story, because you are in ministry, and that ministry that you have already been alluding to is one that we really want to promote for a few minutes, because this crusade is going to be taking place in Dallas March 6th of next year, and it's an opportunity not only for the people around the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex to go and see it live, but for literally thousands. I mean, up to about 4,000 venues. Some of those will be churches, others will be homes, others will be, like you said, car dealerships or whatever. People can actually go and bring their friend to that, and thus begin to have a real impact for the gospel in our neighborhoods and in our communities. So talk about some of the things that you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I mean, after I got saved, one of the things I immediately realized upon standing up is, wow, I'm going to be doing what that man on stage is doing, you know, and that was Greg Laurie. Little did I know that I'd actually get to serve alongside him.
Yes, you do.
In ministry. And so I'm very excited about this. I still had 3.5 years to serve as an active duty Navy SEAL, and, you know, I believe there's a just cause for war, and we're going up against evil men, you know, that in some cases they take, you know, suicide vests and strap them onto mentally handicapped women. So I don't know a Christian man in the world that wouldn't want to do something about that to help the helpless. But upon getting out, I wanted to jump into full-time ministry, and there was an opportunity that opened up over at Harvest, which is the church that Greg Laurie pastors. He's been pastoring that for over 40 years now, and we've been doing these crusades. He's been doing these crusades. This will be 26 years going at it.
That's right.
And so now this big event, Harvest America, really is just about getting the gospel across the entire nation in one day. It's one church all the way across the board. And really, there are no excuses. You can't get someone to come over to your church. Have a barbecue in your backyard and just have them come along. And just really sit back and watch the show. See what the Lord's going to do. Greg is a fantastic communicator. There's no doubt about that. I'm the type of guy that's going to tune out. Whenever I go to church, I don't want to listen. But this guy grabbed my attention right away. And he went from the natural right into the supernatural. He's obviously got a gift for preaching the gospel. But my parents played a part in getting me there. And this is important because this is a part that everybody else can play as well. I know that they were continually praying for me to go to church. And they're continually asking me to go. And they probably had to feel a little disheartened because I would be so rejectful. Just, no, I'm not going. I would come home with a twisted ankle sometimes, limping on it. My mom would say, "What happened to you?" I go, "I don't know. I was drunk last night and I rolled my ankle, but I got to get better. I got to run a 10K tomorrow." And she goes, "Whoa, I was praying that the Lord would get your attention somehow. Come to church." And I'd be like, "You call this praying for me? Stop praying against me if this is what your prayers are." But, in reality, they really wanted me to go. And I realized that, people can kind of lose heart sometimes, but be persistent. The book of James, it says the fervent and effective prayer of a righteous man avails much. And we realized that the righteous man was a man just like you and I, Elijah. That's what the Bible says. Praying fervently is just praying persistently, and praying effectively is praying, I think, biblically, praying for biblical results, that your friend, that your neighbor, that your coworker would respond to the gospel. And so your job really is just to pray, to ask, and then to get them there one way or another, whether that be in a church, whether that be in a barbecue, or some outside venue where, some churches are getting together, and just sit back and see what the Lord will do as the gospel's preached. And, the Holy Spirit will be effective in accomplishing what it has come to do. Jesus says that the spirits come into the world, and it's to convict men, of their sin, so that they realize that their need for a Savior. The greater appreciation they have for the sin, the greater appreciation they have for their Savior. And so folks can find out all the info they need to find out about that. It's very simple. It's called Harvest America. They can find out all the info they need at harvestamerica.com.
That's very good. And again, the process is very simple. Right now, be praying, but then invite and then bring. The invite part is very important because over the years of these 26 years, they recognize that most of the individuals that come forward, you raised your hand, then they had you stand up, and then you came forward, and your girlfriend at the time, now your wife, goes, what's going on, But, you went forward. But again, most of the people that go forward were invited there by someone else. So I really want to encourage right now our listeners to, number one, pray about the individuals that they might invite. I want to challenge pastors or Sunday school leaders or other Christians to consider what they might do to set up a venue right there. You can do it in your church. You could do it in your home. You could do it in all sorts of different community centers or other places. And then most importantly, after you pray, invite, but again, bring them so that they will actually come as you did. And your plan was not to go forward. As a matter of fact, you'd already told your girlfriend, don't raise your hand. And then all of a sudden your hand goes up, right?
My hand's going up. I'm looking over at her. I'm grabbing her hand saying, come with me. She looks at me like I just drank the Kool-Aid I told her about not to drink. And she says, no, and I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going forward, and that was just, that was a huge night. That March 14, 2007. That's the night I really became a Christian. She asked me, she says, so what happened? Are we going out tonight? I go, no, I became a Christian because I knew that we had this keg of beer hiding in the garage. I hid it underneath a blanket in my dad's garage. And, earlier that night, he says, look, son, you're not welcome in our home anymore because you're dangerous. You're going to get yourself killed or somebody else killed. I mean, the night before, I had spread blood all over the walls of my family's home, challenged my dad to a fight. But now a couple years later, I hid that thing pretty well. We're doing some spring cleaning, and my dad, he unveils it. I forgot about it. I see it. He goes, what is this? And I'm like, remember that night we all went to church? I got a funny story to share with you about my original plans for that evening.
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of just some proof, the fruit, that changed. Never
2
went
years
back.
later, that the keg meant nothing to you 2 years later, and things changed. Well, again, anybody that doubts the importance of conversion just needs to read this book and hear your story. And so, again, I appreciate you taking the time to join with us today. I want to see if we can maybe play this again sometime for other people to listen. But most importantly, if you want to have in your hands a book that I think is going to be a great witnessing tool, especially to somebody that's interested in the military, they will read this cover to cover because it is very well written. It is entitled Seal of God. The path is narrow, but the reward is great. The foreword by Greg Laurie. And of course, it is written by Chad Williams with David Thomas. And we have a link on the website so that if you want to find out a little bit more about Chad or about Harvest America, or if you can't find the book, we've given you an opportunity to order it as well. And of course, if you go there, you'll see NavySealChadWilliams.com, and then you'll see all sorts of great material. So, Chad, it's just great to have you in studio.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We're going to do this again, I think, and certainly I know that there are going to be some venues I'm going to be with you this week in Dallas, so I'm glad that you came in. And you didn't get a lot of sleep, but I'm glad it worked out. And so we'll get you slept up and ready to go for all the other events. But if you found yourself saying, I would like a little more of the information we're talking about, or the story was great, I didn't get all of it because I had to step out of the room, or I know somebody that needs to hear it, we do have a way in which you can download the podcast or the livecast. So if you would like to take that and pass it on to someone else, I would encourage you to do so. We have some videos there. My assignment to you is to watch one of those videos perhaps. Then click that share button. Put it on your Facebook page or send it to someone or put it on your blog. I think this is a way that you can have people hear the story of Chad Williams and also know a little bit more about the book Seal of God. So it's great to have you with us. Let's just, before we run out of time, mention that, again, if you would like to help us out financially, we are coming to the end of our fiscal year. So, again, you can go to the website pointofview.net. You're going to find a lot of great material there. My commentary today is there. Our take action item is there. And, of course, we always have a video for you to watch, and we have some of those as well. So we encourage you to do what you can to support this ministry, and we are privileged because of a few donors to have a matching fund. So, again, if you would like to give before the end of this fiscal year, your gift of $100 becomes $200. Your gift of $300 becomes $600. And so, again, I would encourage you to do what you can to support this ministry. Find out a little bit more about some of the great material that is available through Harvest America. And we certainly will encourage you to make sure that you mark that date, March 6th, for that opportunity. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Noel Boucher rescues people. The ministry he leads, Pure Hope, reaches those trapped in sex trafficking and helps set them free. Noel has listened to Point of View since he was a child, and that enables him to cut through the competing stories that try to give meaning to our times and to see God's story for his own life.
We have to understand God's narrative and our role in that. And of course, Christian radio, and specifically Point of View, is touching thousands and millions of lives across the world and equipping people to walk in that worldview.
Your gift to Point of View can make an impact for generations. And hear this, we all want to give generously. And right now, at the end of our fiscal year, no matter what your gift, $25 or $5,000, it will be doubled by a generous matching gift from ministry friends. So give now, online at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.